All right, great. Well, welcome everyone to this open dialogue call on growth edges in regional organizing in New England, part of the Thriving Resilient Communities 2019 Movement Strategy Dialogue and the first gathering of members of the Strategy Circle for Regional Organizing in New England. Lots of different layers, all sort of intersecting. So, I have a Google Doc here for those of you that like to look at docs at the same time that we're on video. You do not have to do that. So if that sort of stresses you out to have two windows open at once, don't worry about it. But anybody who does like to, oops, that's the wrong one. That's our main regional organizing doc. Here's the one for today's call. Anybody who does like to multitask in that way and wants to help take some notes, that would be cool. And our agenda is also there, which I can put into the chat too. That might be an easier thing to do, or another way for people to see things. The bullet points disappear, but so I'm going to take a little bit of time to just sort of orient people to the context for this call. We'll do some brief intros. Actually, let's do that first, and then some, and then no, I'll do the context first, and then we'll do some brief intros, some little intro breakouts. We'll come back together and share some stories in the whole group, and do a couple more breakouts, I think, and then come back together to close. That's at least the plan. We'll see how all that goes, and the plan is to be together for the next not quite 2 hours. Is there anybody who's not planning to stay for the full 2 hours? Ted's not sure. Okay, Dana, you've got to leave early. Oh, right. Yeah, you said that. Yeah, just a little. Okay. There is the scheduling thing we need to do. Maybe. All right, we'll figure it out. We'll go with the flow. I'm almost wondering if we should start with the scheduling bit. Ted's sort of thinking.
Let's do intros.
All right. Why don't we do intros? And and then I'll talk more about why we're here. I think everybody's got at least some idea at this point anyway. So maybe I don't even need to say too much about that. Yeah, my suggestion is that we try to keep these pretty brief in the full group, and then we'll go into just some groups of 2 or 3 and have a little mini breakout where you can talk a bit more. So just looking for your name, where you are, the name of the organizational hat or hats you're wearing here, but not a whole explanation of what those organizations are. And then just rating on a scale of 1 to 7, how valuable you plan for this call to be. So 1 is yuck and 7 is wow. So why don't we go around and hear all the voices, and then we'll spend 5 minutes in some break. Why don't we go in the order roughly that we arrived? So I think that is going to be Chris. Chris, do we have audio from you? We should confirm that. You couldn't dial in? Well, what happened when you, shit. How is that? You called in on your phone and it didn't connect? How is that possible? So what about try again and don't use the participant ID. You'll just be 2 boxes on the screen, but at least you'll have audio. You should be able to just get audio on your phone straight as a separate participant, and then you can keep this open. All right. Meanwhile, so we'll go. I don't know. We'll go in the order on my screen here. So we'll go Ted, and then Annette, and then Dana, and then I'll say who else. So again, it's name, where you are, organizational name or names, and how valuable you plan for this call to be on a scale of 1 to 7.
My name is Ted. I'm part of Sociocracy for All. I'm in Amherst, Massachusetts. And of course, I wouldn't be here if I didn't plan to make this a 7. Why would I show up otherwise? And one tiny little tag along, because I was sort of hesitant about staying all the whole day, that was not related to this call, or, of course related to this call, but I have my brother visiting, and he lives in India. So this is very precious time. So, if there's, anyway, so that's pulling me away. It's not about this call. It's about this visit. Check.
Hi, My name is Annette. I'm in Boston. I am from Core Power, Boston Metro East Community Energy Cooperative.
Good morning. I'm Dana Peterson. I live in Northampton, Massachusetts, and I am from the AORTA, the Anti-Oppression Resource and Training Alliance. Check.
Thank you. Welcome to the three of you. So let's do Nate, Madeline, Tyra.
I'm Nate Bixby. I'm in the Quinnipiac bioregion, which is the three watersheds that go into the Long Island Sound from via New Haven Harbor, New Haven, Connecticut. And I'm with Havens for Thriving Futures and the School of Interdependent Living, sometimes known as SOIL. And of course, 7's a great number.
I should emphasize there's no pressure to say 7. Some of you may have no idea if this is going to be valuable or not, and it's totally fine. You can offer a lower number.
I'm next, Madeline. I am in Amherst, Massachusetts. And for this call, I'm calling my project Climate Change Conversations in Libraries. And I am a librarian at UMass Amherst. I'm partnering right now with a group in Boston called Communities Responding to Extreme Weather. And we're aiming to organize libraries across Massachusetts to do some kind of climate change conversation in their library the last week in September. So I'm excited to be on this call. I'm going to give it a 6 and only not reaching 7 because I'm kind of wondering how people who aren't in the library field could help me. I'm pretty sure you can, but that's my only reason for giving it a 6.
All right. Chris, any luck with the phone? All right, so I'm going to open the rooms. And Chris, you and I will stay here in the main room, and hopefully we can land this. We'll see the rest of you back in 5 minutes. You can, you know.
What happened to my introduction?
Oh, Dara, I'm so sorry.
Fine, I'll give it a 0 for my value generator.
Right. Clearly, you're not important.
So my name's Tyra Hamdani. I live in, right now, physically I'm in Jersey, but I've been a resident of New York for 14 years. And I see what happens when you're not a part of New England. You know, the edges just get forgotten. Mine is Hudson River Valley. Which is my growing region and the bioregion that I'm part of. I've got my own business called Regen Futures. Also on the board of the Ogallala Lakota Cultural and Economic Revitalization Initiative at Pine Ridge Reservation, and also a member of the Kiss the Ground chapter in New York. And value generation, 7.
What was the name of your business again? What future?
Regen Futures.
Regen Futures.
Regen Futures.
All right.
Which is around regenerative futures.
Ah, yes.
Ben, can you call up Chris and conference him in?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I don't know. I'm going to figure something out in the next 5 minutes while y'all are in some breakouts. So 5 minutes to just get to know one another a little better. Maybe you want to say something about the 1 to 7 rating and what you're hoping to get out of this call. And we'll come back and talk more about why we're here and get into our core question. What are you learning at the growth edges of your regional organizing work, and what new understanding or capacity might make the difference here? So with that, I'm going to open up the breakouts. Everybody, hopefully you know how to do this. You're going to see a little thing to join a breakout. You just click on that, and you'll get a 1-minute warning to come back. Use the full minute when you're there. All right. So Chris, can you type in the chat at the bottom and communicate that way? What happens when you call in? I don't understand why you can't at least join on the phone with audio. I guess the other option is I could just call you. That might make things easier, except when we're on the phone together, you won't be able to call in. So do you want me to? I'll just see what you say first, and then I'll decide if I should call you or not. I don't see anything in the chat. All right, I'm going to call you.
Hi, Ben.
Hi. So what happens when you try to dial into the call?
I still, the little microphone down in the bottom corner, you know, that says mute and then has the little triangle, which initially the video had that. By calling back in, that cleared up the video, but the mute is still, I still have the little
Okay.
alert.
But so just try, look, forget what you see on the Zoom window. The idea is you're going to dial in as if you were a separate participant on the phone. Okay, so you'll have your video and you'll also be on the phone, and that should work.
Okay, well,
So can you write down the phone number and the meeting ID, or you have the phone number and the meeting ID?
the number that I have.
I mean, you were able to dial in and enter that meeting ID. Did that all work?
Yeah.
So just forget the participant ID part. Just dial in, enter the meeting ID, and then see if that gets you on here to talk to me.
Yeah. So now, just to be clear, I'm dialing in the number by your location and then putting in the meeting ID number.
Right.
Okay, that's what I've been doing.
But then nothing else. Don't do the participant ID. Just do that and see if we can talk on the phone on the call. But I need to hang up, right?
Okay, yeah.
We're almost good with Chris. He's on the phone too, but we're getting crazy echo feedback. So
Hello.
Hey.
Hey, Chris.
Chris, you made it through the portal.
I think it works. There's no echo. You're still 2 boxes, but that's okay.
Is it too echoing?
It's echoing, but it's okay. I think we can live with it.
I think we can embrace your boxes and echoes.
Maybe I fixed the echo now. I don't know. I have him. If you stay muted in your video window and unmuted on the phone, I think that does it.
Yeah.
No. All right, well, we're going to make do. So welcome back.
Hey, Ben?
Yes.
Oh, wow, we're all echoing now?
Here, I'll keep him. If we mute both of Chris's boxes, then we should be okay.
Okay. I was wondering if you wanted to give a bit of an intro to Chris.
Oh, yes, because Chris wasn't able to do that for himself. Good point. And I think even the chat isn't working for you, huh, Chris? Which is just bizarre. So Chris Wood is the executive director of an organization called BALE, B-A-L-E, which stands for Building a Local Economy. It's based in South Royalton, Vermont, and organizes that town and I think 3 or 4 other towns in the surrounding area, something like that. So it's sort of a micro-regional organizing initiative in central Vermont. They also put on a conference called Localize It last fall. I don't know if there are plans to do that again, Chris. No, it was a huge undertaking. So that spanned everything from local to global. It was done in partnership with Helena Norberg Hodges. I forget the name of her organization for local resilience. And was a really wonderful event. So he's thinking globally and acting locally and things in between, and has a great local meeting space in South Royalton. Yeah, thank you for that. So I don't want to talk too much about why we're here. I mean, the main reason we're here today is to explore this question together, independent of anything else that we do or don't do, and in service to the movement strategy dialogue. That's an open inquiry that the Thriving Resilient Communities Collaboratory, which is a US-wide initiative. We host this every year. This is our 4th annual dialogue. And it comes just before we move into a collaborative grant-making process that we facilitate. And that also actually funds the collaboratory's own work. And that's done in partnership with the Threshold Foundation. So there's all these different layers of things going on. There's the collaboratory with an ongoing annual cycle. There's this funding thing that we're part of and we do in partnership with others. And there's this dialogue that comes just as its own separate thing, as a shared space for learning that's kind of a global space. And within that, we have these strategy circles this year. It's a new extra wrinkle we've thrown in where we're gathering groups of people that want to focus on a particular area. And this one, as you all know, is focused on regional organizing in New England. So our conversation today is to just start maybe getting to know each other a little bit, and also sensing into what we've been learning about regional organizing, whether you're operating in New England or, as at least in Tara's case, in another region. And I know, Madeline, you may be in touch with other regions, although you're mostly focused on New England too, I think. What are we learning? What are at the growth edges of our learning? And what new understanding or capacity would really make a difference? And if together we can surface some of those ideas, that I think can be valuable to share with other participants in the dialogue, with people who are looking at the output from this dialogue once it's complete, which is going to be January 7th to 9th, somewhere in there for this round of conversation. And we're going to do some shared meaning making later in January in the dialogue process. Anyway, there's learning coming out of this that we want to share with other dialogue participants and the wider world. And hopefully we'll land on some things today that'll do that. I thought a good way to start would be to see if any of the people here, if we stay in the full group and sort of hear extended stories from everyone, we could do that, and we'd use up, could take a good hour just to go around. And I find there's only so much I can take in that kind of one after another of dense information. So my thought is that we would just hear from maybe 3 people who feel like you've got actually something pretty meaty to say on this question, that you're clear on where you're at with a growth edge and what new understanding would make a difference. And you could tell a little story about that really grounds it in the work that you're doing. So it's also a way that for at least a few of the organizations represented here, we can get a clear sense of what you're doing. And then we can go into, I think we'll have time for 2 breakouts, shuffling the groups around to just think together, share some more stories in smaller groups, and then come back and see what we've got. So does that work for everybody, or is an agenda? No, great. Yeah, so who among you, and we could sit with this for just a minute of, some silent reflection even to see who's really feeling a calling to speak on this. And the thought would be you talk for, 3 to 5 minutes, something in that terrain, telling a little bit about, just quick overview on your work. Where is this growth edge you're working on? What are you learning there? What would make a difference if you had new understanding or new capacities? So let's just give
I
it.
would like to go first, if that's okay.
Sure.
Thank you. Also, because after my story, I have to drive very shortly, and then I won't be able to share for just a little while.
I'm wondering if we could have that 30 seconds, 60 seconds of quiet too.
Yeah, why don't we do that first?
Okay.
You can organize your own thinking while others decide if they want to step up.
Okay, so we'll rest for 30 seconds.
Yes, give us a little chime to come out of that. And I just want to name that, some of you may have questions about the intro and the context and all these levels of things. So we'll make some space towards the end, I think, to do that, or we can address those one-on-one. But I think for now, we'll just dive in and trust that we can use this time well, even if some things aren't clear. So Madeline, we'll start with you and then see who else wants to speak.
Okay, so I'll take about 3 or 4 minutes. So I'm really happy to be here to tell the short version of what I'm trying to do in libraries, and I'm hoping that it will kind of stimulate some ideas if people want to feed back to me during the call or after. So I went around New England last spring to each state, and I had an average of like 12 librarians coming to learn how to facilitate a climate change conversation in their library. So these were urban, rural librarians, a few academic, but mostly public. And I used the World Cafe format as sort of my centerpiece. And we did a short version of World Cafe. And if you're not familiar, basically you're sitting as if in a cafe, but you can have these sort of more sensitive, complicated conversations in this convivial setting. And the American Library Association, which is like our umbrella, they're actually doing training around this too for librarians. So I felt very affirmed using this tool. It wasn't just my pet project. And for people that are hosting them, you really don't need to be a climate change or any kind of expert. You're more bringing people together who might not ever have met and sitting down and drawing and doodling and sort of surfacing this collective wisdom. So now I've gone all around and I have an online group of 50 or so New England librarians, and now I'm scaling it just to Massachusetts. So I'm going to be doing like various webinar trainings for Massachusetts librarians to think about a climate change conversation that last week in September. It's called Climate Preparedness Week, and it started in the city of Boston last year for the first time. And now, because I hooked up with them, I said, gee, I'm willing to put tons of effort and energy into spreading it across the state through libraries. And they said, great. So if any of you know Massachusetts librarians, I guess I'll just say for now, send them my way. And I'll soon have a landing page where all the trainings will be set up. And I'm also going to speak at a national conference about it, just to kind of sprinkle some seeds more broadly. But it's all going to be in one place, probably in a couple of weeks. So that's my story.
Thanks, Madeline. Do you want to say a little bit about where you're sort of on the growth edge and you're learning with this?
Oh, well, my growth edge, I keep thinking back to this tarot card reading that my friend gave me a couple of years ago. And I see myself as this, like, stirring this giant cauldron, and it's getting sometimes like a little too hot and it's bubbling over. And the message is like, don't put anything else in your cauldron. You're going to get hurt. It's too much. And I feel like that's my edge right now. It's like, how much am I supposed to keep stirring that pot? Like, for instance, I pushed a little bit toward this, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, because I'm connected to one of the planners there. And they're like, we don't really know what you're trying to do, but do you want to use our meeting room and invite in librarians from the 43 municipalities? I'm like, do I? I don't know. It's like, where's the edge? How far and fast do I want to push myself? And when do I need to kind of healthily contract and, plant my roots a little closer to home? So that's where I struggle, is like my capacity and who's gonna be on a team with me. Because right now it's just me and this really enthusiastic librarian at Merrimack College out in Eastern Mass. She's like my one mainstay partner in this. So it's exciting. It's a wild ride. Just wrap up with that.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who else feels called to share a story? And I suppose, just to, if it helps, it could be also something you're imagining doing but not yet doing, that you've considered. Might be fair game. Yeah. Tyra?
Yeah, so I'm going to share this story, and it's a little bit on the other side, actually, of what Madeline was speaking. And I'm mindful that this is a New England discussion, but in the hopes that it's still working towards that 7 on value. So I am in Hudson River Valley. We have a beautiful river that is really in the nation quite special, because we're not drying up, and we have an abundance of growers in our region, and we've got a deep history from whether it's the Haudenosaunee and the different groups that have been here, and the evolution. I mean, I'm sure everybody in the group knows about New York City, its potential, and probably some about Hudson River Valley as well. And what I envision, what I see is, and we've got all the makings, we've got all the elements. We've got, for example, the Penniman sisters. We've got Soul Fire Farm and Wild Seed, which are using farms as social instruments to to help deal and help move over through the generational trauma of slavery and Native American genocide, etc. We've got people trying to do agroforestry. I mean, very cool stuff up and down the valley. And I have spent this past year really meeting a lot of the different producers and the different people who are doing all of this. And I was told, well, you could spend years going up and down the valley and meeting cool people. How do you create that mycorrhizal network that is not too top heavy, because all of these are pretty strong, awesome people themselves. They don't need any kind of top heavy stuff, right? And where the growth edge has really been is, I don't traditionally come from a deep, my experience actually sits in the corporate world. I used to do management consultancy for 13 years with financial services firms. my last 2 years have been very committed to this, though, to getting the right education and learnings and all sorts, and really understanding, well, how do you start convening something like this, you know? And for me, more than even funding, which is the usual ask, it's around the gravitas to pull all of these deep people together and to show that there's credibility here, that I deeply care and do have an understanding. And so partly it's also been this area around good mentorship, good regional mentors who do have that gravitas. And as you all know, whether it's the chefs trying to do stuff or whether it's producers, everybody in the food system is always overly maxed out. Nobody sits around and, you know, nobody sits around and has a cup of coffee and goes like, right, what are we gonna do? So there are people who realize this is valuable. They know they're part of something bigger. And the growth edges, the sense of urgency where we're at with the timing, we don't have those years to really, really have this, you know, just shake out over many years. We would have a lot of benefit in getting stronger interrelationships going. And so, yeah, how do you create those right levers? Where are the proper entry points, so to speak? And that's where I'm at.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more.
Just very briefly, I'm finding a lot of traction in the growth edge of conversations around shifting a mentality of trying to get and keep stuff and ideas and projects to how do we recognize the emerging seeds of a regenerative culture in places we might not expect. Whoever we are, we've inherited a lot of expectations, and so it's a growth edge to put. I mean, it's all my life, but I'm bringing it out more with other people, being curious together, and then recognizing, well, like Tahara's going up and down the Hudson Valley, that's an act of recognition and identifying where this is emerging. And I'm curious as to how that process of identification can be kind of more of just our habit of how we create a new culture rather than the top-down planning approach and big, you know, strategies, but something that's more granular and personal and local, and can build a soil of connection.
Thank you, Nate. A way to build the soil of connection. Anyone else want to go? I know I said 3, but maybe someone else is holding a story, a question, a little bit of learning. Okay. So the plan was to then go into some small groups and keep talking about these ideas, sharing a little more about, you know, what your organization is up to, and, you know, again, what, you know, just thinking together about this idea of growth edges in regional organizing. One thing I want to name too is that although we're focused in this circle on New England, you know, one of the edges I've seen is whether New England is really a very good frame. You know, it's a colonial entity, really, literally, and then the name as well, and why these 6 states, you know, and it's not particularly bioregional. There's a colonial cultural heritage, but other than that, culturally, it's quite mixed too. And so, you know, certainly we're not restricting our conversation to thinking about the whole of New England as a region, whether it's subregions within it, or what we can learn from other regions, or do we even want to think of, you know, the Hudson River Valley connected to the southern Berkshires, you know, or the Berkshires, western Massachusetts as a region? Is that useful? Or the whole Northeast? So I don't want to constrict the regional thinking, and I think part of the question is what regional scales actually work well. Like, for example, co-op power, in that you're operating across the whole Northeast, right? You're in New York City, in New York State.
Yes, we are. We are in New York City. We've got a small one in Vermont, in Boston. Oh, I'm going blank, but I think we've got about 4 different places that we're operating, and we would like to actually spread them out, especially within New England, to continue to ensure that people get to renewable energy and lower the energy bills, and contribute to climate justice. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's an example, and I don't, you know, might be interesting in your breakout to think, you know, how is the Northeast as a larger region working for your organization, which I think is you know, your particular model, which is probably very different from what some of the other people are doing here, that's more locally centered or more like a consultancy in the case of Ted's work with Sociocracy for All. Excuse me. And I think, Dana, you're sort of in that kind of consulting to multiple organizations across the region kind of range or territory. So, and then Madeline, you've got Massachusetts, you've got New England wide, you're looking nationally and globally as well, and sort of crossing all these boundaries. So we got an interesting mix in terms of scale, and that might be part of what you get to in your smaller group conversations. Are there any questions people want to ask before we go into that for, say, about 20 minutes to see what we can stir up together here?
So are we going with any specific questions into the 20-minute breakout, or?
I think we're staying with this main question. You know, what are you learning at the growth edges in your regional organizing work, and what new understanding or capacity might make the difference there? So that might, that might point us towards some next steps and some action. And you can also just use this time to get to know each other a little better too, since, you know, we are in a group. Some of us know one another to varying degrees, others maybe not much at all. So there's that too. And maybe we'll stay with the we'll do 2 rounds of these. We have time, so we'll go back to the first set of groups we had, with Chris and I each joining a group. And Chris, I'm wondering what may happen with you is that we get we only want your phone in the group because you're going to create an echo when you get there. So we'll just keep your we'll keep your other image in the main room. I think we can just assume that's going to happen. So let's see. And actually, I think we'll keep one group just right here in the main room also. So why don't I? assign Chris's phone. All right, so Chris, you're going to go with Dana, Madeline, and Nate to break out, and the rest of you just stay here with me. And here we go. See you in 20 minutes. So I think we're still going to have Chris's video. Maybe turn your video off, Chris. You can't even.
He's so holographic.
You can't hear me. Oh, actually, he probably can hear. I'll send him a message. I have never had this happen, and he's used Zoom before too. I've done a lot of Zoom calls. I've never quite seen, like, usually at least when you call in, there isn't this echo thing. I'm just mystified by that. Yeah, I'm going to just send Chris a message to turn off his video.
While you're doing that, Ted, did you want to go first? Because in our intros, you were, cut off briefly.
Oh well, I guess I'm still feeling my way into the question. How about I just do it out loud? Are you willing to listen to that? I started saying, and I know Ben knows that we're more on the international global scene, and it's Ben. I said earlier that I was excited, like, as in physically, like just by the thought of people being so close here to me in Northampton and such. I mean, I know Madeline because anyway. So, but
do you want to say just a little bit about Sociocracy for All?
Yeah, sure. So, Sociocracy for All is basically, you can imagine it as the mix of a nonprofit for education, a consultancy, and a community organizing, community organizing. So we consider ourselves community or movement support. So, any kind of social change organization needs governance, and we teach governance, and we try to do it in a way so that it's accessible to everybody. And that's a lot of fun, and it attracts a lot of people from all over the world. So and we sort of go with what's easy, if somebody shows up who's whatever from Turkey, we go, sure, we'll work with you. So that's, I guess, that has been our strategy, though we just hired a third person on staff. So we have 60 members and 2 people on staff, and now a third person on staff. And he's very involved locally. So that changes things quite a bit. And I have to say, sitting here, I really I really feel the gap that we have. There is this disconnect, between the international scene and where we are right here, because we simply don't get around to even showing up to local events because we're just on Zoom all the time. So just a whole, and I guess Sociocracy has been, at least, it's starting to shift right now, but it has been too specialized to, do things in Amherst because there's not enough traction. So anyway, but in New England or in things with a little bit of a wider reach than just sort of very local, are gaining some traction. So that's all interesting. And now with Andy on the team, we're thinking, wow, he's really doing things, connecting us in at least Pioneer Valley right now, I guess. So that's a shift in our work. I don't know if me personally, like for the organization, I don't know how it's going to affect me personally, but the organization is gonna have some a different spin on it slightly. We also, I guess, we want to, the more traction we have, the more sort of thing, you know, the nerve endings come together. You know, at the beginning you work with whoever shows up. As soon as the nerve endings come together, we support more the building of local networks. Like, I don't know, whenever somebody from Northern Italy contacts me, I play them back to talk to the other person in Northern Italy. Don't talk to me, talk to him, you know, like trying to keep people, like encourage people to, like, yes, the international scene is exciting, and yet I want you to know who's also in your city or in your region. So sort of the both and of that, you know, because on a topical level, I like the themes that you're interested in, you might find companionship with people internationally, but less, and in a less specific thing, it's good to have your companionship regionally. So that's a balance that I'm aware of and that we're playing with quite a bit. Let's see. I want to reread the question real quick, and then I'll finish. Where's the question now? What new understanding of capacity might make the difference? I guess the understanding, or the paradigm shift for me is like, well, we're actually doing that kind of stuff now. So there's nothing even that has to come from the outside. It's already happened, that shift to, whoa, maybe we actually have capacity to do this. And I'm complete for now. I hope I wasn't too rambly. It made sense to me. Thank you. You helped me just by being here listening. I have no idea what this did to you, but whatever, it happened. Check.
Thank you. I had a question. Can I ask you a quick question? So sociocracy is the governance models and frameworks. They are something that you guys provide when somebody reaches out to you. So they're well defined.
Yes, it's very well defined, though there's a lot of flexibility in you can tailor it, but it sort of comes with a set of things that we do as standard tools. And what we do is we do training, because many people have a hard time wrapping their head around it just from hearing about it. So we do some immersion training, you know, we do the typical workshops, yeah, all of that stuff. I guess our strength is the fact that we seem to be fun enough that people come back and want to hang out. And that's, to me, that's an important thing that has to do with organizing, right? And that is that many people are very isolated and that they're interested in that, you know, like say they're like in some company in London, you know, some IT business, and they're interested in new forms of management, self-management, but nobody around them is. But then they find us and find people to hang out with, so that they are not the odd person, right? So, and then growing from there, they're like, no, there are actually people who do the self-organizing thing. You know, you don't have to do it hierarchically. You don't have to use those old structures. It's possible. Like normalizing that new normal, I guess, right? And that happens through the relationships. Just by talking about it, that's not going to change significantly. It's people not feeling so alone in it that makes a difference. And that's why we're not a traditional consultancy, but we're this community organizing thing at the same time. I guess that's a good way to describe it.
Sweet. Yeah.
And you, cooperatives are one of the types of organizations you've found, you know, are particularly interested in sociocracy. So I'm curious, in that, you know, being part of a cooperative, have what kind of governance you're using there? Is there some kind of, and how the governance is working, you know, since you have these local cooperatives that kind of run themselves, but you have this regional network. How does that work?
Well, what Core Power, I think, recently did is that they used to just have one main board for Core Power as the common board, and they would have steering committees within all the different community energy cooperative. But recently, this was changed to ensure that each community energy cooperative actually elects its own board, so that they can run their own things. So this we did in the first weekend of December out in Springvale, where we actually have our own board as Boston Metro East that will have its own meetings. And one person from that board will actually go to the common board every month and report on what it is that we're doing. So this, I think it's important to actually have some sort of governance structure at the community level, so that because you know, it's different from the common board, because what happens in Boston or what happens at the common office in Northampton is totally different. And what we are doing in Boston is actually different from what people in Northampton are doing. We are promoting community solar because our communities live in rented apartments, and that is what makes more sense. They are promoting solar on individual homes because that is the setting that they work in. So I think organizing really should be tailored to the community that you work in. What we are imagining to do in Boston this coming year with the new board basically is to go into the 6 different places that we want to work in. I think I mentioned them before you joined us, Ben, which are Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, all those different cities. And what we're doing is we are going to be looking for ambassadors who actually live within those communities. And we are going to be working with them so that they can actually organize people, for example, within Roxbury, organize people where we can actually meet with them and find out what types of community solar they want, because I don't think that we can bring a blanket approach to everybody, because as we say, communities are different. So we're thinking of actually using the, I'm sure you're all familiar with Professor Gann's community organizing, where you basically go into these communities and organize them, set up like a snowflake type of organizing system, where you have a leader who then finds other people, and it continues to permeate into the community. That's what we're imagining to do this coming year, especially so that we can promote community solar. And we also want to promote solar for nonprofits, because these 2 people don't have access to renewable solar because of the tax credit issue. So we are sourcing tax equity financing so that these groups can actually get solar and be able to get the benefits of solar and be able to reduce their energy bills. And that needs organizing, and that's what we're trying to do at Boston Metro East.
Yeah, so it's fascinating, even operating within just, you know, a single city and 4 neighborhoods within the city. You're saying you need to go even finer grained than that within each neighborhood, differences there and relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the plan.
And you're also, I mean, you've got this northeast wide infrastructure.
Yeah, we have this northeast. So what basically we've been doing, like in the fall semester, we started with community solar training, where everybody from the community energy cooperatives was part of this training, which we had it bi-weekly through Zoom. And we were talking about the different ways we could do community solar and how you could adapt it to your community or to your community energy cooperative. Some of the people who actually joined were as far as from California, who actually were not part of cooperatives, and you know, just sharing their experiences and what it is they would want to do. Yeah. So we started off with that. And now from that, we go back into our different communities and plan further right to the neighborhood.
And interesting that you're working using Marshall Gann's model. Is everyone, are you familiar with that, Ted? That's more of an activist model, right? That's a movement building framework, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm part of a fellowship where I'm also, which is supporting my work. I'm part of We Own It Fellowship. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it basically works with energy cooperatives, and they have been training us on the Marshall Gann's method of organizing. So I'm just using it in Boston Metro East, yeah.
Yeah, one of the things we're doing here is compiling lists of resources. So
Yeah.
If you have any links you can share on that?
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, there's tons of people who actually have been trained on community organizing using GANs as methods, even here in Boston. I'm sure I will share those resources with all of you.
Great. So we've got about 5.5 minutes left.
Do you want to share, Ben?
Yeah, maybe I'll say a little bit about Food Solutions New England. I was also part of the New England Resilience and Transition Network that died last year or even 2 years ago. I think it was last year. So there's different stories there. You know, I think the thing that's kind of coming up for me was what I shared on the call the other day, Tara, when you were there too. I think about this, you know, so Food Solutions New England is this very tightly organized collective impact structure. And this collective impact model was something that some consultants out in California developed, and then the Stanford Social Innovation Review published an article about it, and all these people looked at it and said, oh my God, this is great, and funders threw money at it, because it sounds like it solved this big problem of how do you get a whole bunch of different organizations to collaborate on a project, or on transforming a food system, let's say. And I haven't, so they've been going, that organization, that initiative, for I think 5 or 6 years. And I only joined, I knew of it, but I only joined them in February as part of their process team. The sense that I get is that I mean, I don't know how they feel, like, you know, have they accomplished what they hoped to in that amount of time? But for the amount of resources, they're very well funded, very well organized. It's connecting lots of people. People seem to really love it and appreciate it, and they're showing up, and there's a lot of goodwill. They're really working hard on integrating social justice into, you know, transformation of the food system as a key lens, and saying, you know, this is part of the story. Connecting to indigenous people, people of color who, you know, were pushed off the land, but, you know, recognizing that they've been farmers too, but somehow we don't think, especially in New England, about anybody but white farmers. So that, you know, doing a whole systems kind of thing, and yet I just wonder if they've accomplished as much so far as they'd hoped they might by now. And the basic idea is they've asked everybody to sort of form working groups on particular projects. So everybody's attention is taken out of what their organization is doing and is put into the middle, into these different things. There's a racial equity challenge they do. There's a leadership training institute. There's a thing on the state of the New England food system that they're trying to develop, sort of a dashboard. Others, a new narrative thing, a policy thing. But you know, the way that you talked about how you're, you know, so you're not in a position to do that, right, Tara? And you don't even want to really be the center. So you were sort of naming this other way of operating that's much more like the way soil works, I think. You know, you're just creating some fertile ground for stuff to happen without saying, you know, we're all going to come into my plot of land and plant a community garden here, you know, and everybody else has their own gardens already, but somehow, yeah, I don't know, at best, maybe there's some seedlings that you can take back out there. I think maybe that's the metaphor, but it feels very, you know, it's just, it's challenging. I think that, you know, what else, to me, because I'm like you, I'm happy to be participating in that, and I think maybe amazing things are already happening and will, and maybe I just can't see it, or it just takes time. These things do. But I also sense there's other possibilities, that if you're going to go to the trouble and effort of pulling people together, there are ways that are more flexible and agile and emergent for collaboration and mutual support and cooperation to happen, that can shift the whole system, that don't sort of require this, you know, this really heavy process. I mean, they started with a whole systems mapping thing before they did everything, right? It took them 2 years to do that, and then their projects came out of that, and now they're in the project. It's just, you know, great. And what else can we do that's more lightweight and flexible and can sort of pop up and be of service? That's my question.
Yeah, and I wrote, when you were talking, lean was the word, right? It's like exactly lean and agile, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's that, but even that could be applied to the idea that these organizations are supposed to be doing new things together, right? That, you know, as opposed to, and maybe they are, but it's so, the vision seems to be so centralized.
Yeah.
Where I see you, like, you know, being a connector and finding like 8 different ways that stuff could happen that could be each their own little lean agile experiment in the Hudson River Valley. I'm gonna close out the breakout. We have another minute.
And a quick question, we may not finish this, is one of the things I was talking about when I look at the Lakota project versus Hudson River Valley, you know, obviously the scale of the Lakota community, they're only 47,000 people, but they're 2.1 million acres, right? And the question of how much community organizing becomes harder because our communities itself are fractured, right? Like we don't go into, we're trying to like, okay, the food system, boom. But you know, in the Lakota, it's so easy to bring that out because they're already strong in their community, right? They understand roles, they understand some of those things which we've kind of lost in the more modern Western context of community. And so I don't know, Ben, how much Food Solutions even thinks about that and that, you know.
Well, we can ask Lisa Fernandez when she joins us, and Nia Story is also part of it. So we can maybe not today, but at some point we can explore that. But yeah, so revitalizing culture and working with the existing culture.
Yeah.
All right. So I think the idea is to just do it again. We're going to shuffle the groups. This is kind of a mini World Cafe, the process that that Madeline mentioned. Normally, we'd have a slightly larger group, and we would do 3 rounds. Nate, you want to?
Yeah, I just, we were on a group with Chris, and we could never, I don't know if you were able to hear us, Chris.
Oh, shit. Was he muted the whole time?
Yes.
Oh, I wish you'd asked me for help. Yeah, it's *6 to unmute yourself. I think on your phone. God damn it. I'm so sorry.
And Ben, is everybody on this group in Slack?
Okay.
Like, is that a way to be in touch after this?
Well, Annette and Dana are new, so I think everyone else is on Slack, and I think I've sent invitations out. If I haven't, to all of you, Dana's yes. And Annette, if I haven't, I will. I don't know if you use Slack, but we're trying to use that for our internal communications instead of email as much as we can. And I'm happy to walk people through that. Hey, Chris.
I'm here.
Yeah, there's. I should have mentioned this in the bottom right. You know, when you're in a breakout, you can ask the host for help, and I think I would have seen that. And
I could.
You clicked it. Yeah, but your Zoom window is not functional clearly because you can't even chat. How well do you want to? All right, we'll just trust it in listening mode. You've set some things up, and now you'll be able to speak. We'll shuffle the groups.
I was able to hear the whole conversation.
Right. So let's see. I'm going to take Ted there and Madeline. Let's see, Annette, Madeline, Ted, Dana, Tahara, Chris, and me. Who am I missing? Oh, Nate. Okay. So it'll be Annette, Madeline, Nate, and Ted. That's 2 from each group, right? And then Chris, you'll stay here with me and Tahara and Dana. What happened to Dana? We lost Dana. Oh, she had to go. Right, she had to leave early. Okay. Yeah. we'll do it that way. So we'll go for another 20 minutes. I think that'll work. Yeah, that'll give us enough time to come back. So we're just continuing, you know, you can share a little bit of some of the ideas that came out in your last group, see if there's some themes or patterns there, and just continue the conversation with the same question. Get to know one another a little better in your new configurations. Be back in 20 minutes.
So are we just Ben and Tahira?
The three of us, yeah.
Three of
Yeah.
us. Okay.
I think
And I get to talk. Okay, I'm going to take all 20. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, please do, Chris.
There was a lot, there was a lot that I sort of wanted to inject in that conversation. So I sort of want to, at some point, go back and say, okay, I have all these things to add to that. But anyway,
Would you rather
we move forward. No, that's fine. We'll find a whole new world just between the three of us. So let's,
right.
yeah.
Madeline, there she goes. Okay. And Nate?
Nate went away for a bit, so I think when he'll come back, he'll join his room.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, Chris, you go first.
Oof. Well, I can. Yeah. So I'll sort of riff off of the previous, and you'll just get to hear it. There was a talk about the regionalism, and Nate talking about the Connecticut River Valley and the oops.
Hey, Nate, so you can stay with us or you can go to the other group. Yeah, he's going now.
No, he's gone. Now we can continue talking about him, now that he's gone.
Now I'm talking about Nate. Yeah.
It would have been a little reunion
I know.
from the retreat.
Okay. So what I was talking about was, or what Nate was talking about was the Hudson River Valley and the Connecticut River Valley, and I was aware that there was a concentration of people in what I call southern, the southern part of New England, and my orientation is sort of the north, is the northern tier, Vermont being obviously northern tier, but also in terms of where I tend to sort of link up with other organizations and people. It's more like New Hampshire and Maine. So I guess that's not surprising. But the other thing that I wanted to mention was they had, Madeline was talking about the libraries and sort of getting around to the libraries, and they talked about the Pennemans. And right now this is sort of a project that's happening now. We made a film a year ago, and we've actually sort of have altered the film a couple of times, but we're bringing it around to small gatherings. In fact, the size of the scale of the gathering is important. It's ideally sort of 8 to 20 people, so that you can sit in a circle. And the film is sort of a leverage. It's designed to create a conversation around the film. The film's called Dancing with the Cannibal Giant, and the subtitle is New Stories for the Great Transition. And who we have, so there's several stories, and it's telling inspiring stories, mostly by young people. And it happens to be that two of the stories we chose to film were Leah Penniman at Soulfire and Naima Penniman at Climbing Poetry. Anyway, just, there's there's tons and tons of beautiful stories that are happening out there. And the intention of this film is to sit in small groups, largely, hopefully people who know each other. So we've been doing a lot of libraries. So I did want to connect with Madeline around libraries, because we've now been to a lot of libraries in Vermont. And we're looking now to sort of, there's enough sort of growing interest to bring it to locations in Maine. So we'll actually sort of travel outside of our, the range that we can sort of, do now, that we can just sort of go to and come home from, but we'll actually sort of do mini tours. And so I was putting that, I wanted to sort of put that out, well, both to put that out that there's this sort of film dialogue happening that we want to do, and also in terms of what Madeline was doing, just to be able to connect around her work, which of course we can do at in other conversations. So I don't need to spend too much time with that here. So that's not really an edge kind of thing. It's happening. That's sort of a that's what's happening already. And I mean, I guess if there is an edge, is how far are we going to push out this conversation? The film is very specifically regionally focused, so it has a intentional Northeast feel. I mean, it was made that way, the film, although actually it has a very sort of rural, it has a rural bias in terms of the story. 3 of the stories are in a rural setting. One is an indigenous setting in Maine, and the other one is the climbing poetry, which is in Brooklyn. So there was some intention when we sort of went about the idea of creating these stories to have it have a Northeast focus, but as I sort of see it now, it really, I can easily see this film not working in a lot of urban environments, or especially out of the Northeast. So anyway, that's a big part of sort of current focus. New topic. A lot of talk in the last conversation, and I'm sure all over, about sort of regional watershed, bioregional focus. And my real interest is in the scale of how we work together. And so BALE, the organization Building a Local Economy, is White River watershed focused. I think Ben correctly sort of said it's about 4 or 5 towns that we sort of have a strong presence in. But the intention is sort of to actually bring much more awareness collectively in the region to the fact that, oh yeah, I do live in a watershed and I do live in a food shed. So having that increasingly that awareness sort of grow, and what are the sort of tools and resources and capacities that we can create that that actually builds, that kind of awareness. And of course, White River's watershed is, quite small. I mean, if you took all the towns are, it's 14 towns.
But geographically, it's not that tiny, right? I mean, it's a good chunk of Vermont, and
it's a small chunk of Vermont.
Yeah. Okay.
It's I mean, in terms of the thinking, like Hudson River Valley, Connecticut River Valley. Those are sort of substantial identities, potential regional identities. But well, I don't say but. But I think, sort of what's the scale at which people, even in large regions, and Ben, you were talking about, is it New England? This colonial sort of definition. But what's the scale that really can hold people to place an identity, so that they feel that connection, and they know that connection, and they're sort of conscious of that connection. So what is the work? So this is an edge. What is the work that really needs to happen to sort of increasingly engage that sort of consciousness more broadly?
Chris,
Okay,
do you work with the ballet guys too? Bale and BA.
Bale and ballet. Not that much.
Okay.
Ballet is Business Alliance for Local Living Economies. Great group, doing work. And it does have a sort of, they are business, it's about businesses coming together to create a sort of, new model, new value system for business. And yes, in terms of some of the small businesses, like one of the local businesses happens to be in our area. It's called Vermont Creamery. Unfortunately, they just got bought out by Land O'Lakes. I mean, they were B Corp. I mean, the good things, sort of like Ben and Jerry's, sort of bought out by the corporate world. Although at least, as they say, because the woman who owns Vermont Creamery is a big, is a supporter, of course, of our work. Is Land O'Lakes is a co-op, so at least, in terms of her selling it, she sold it to a co-op, a cooperative. And of course, that sort of gets to the conversation as well, even co-ops of certain scale and, sort of how you choose to organize it can be, not sort of the ideal model of real worker participation.
Yeah, and we had this, when Maple Hills Creamery did that, and it was meant to be co-op, and 20 of them kind of got together. There is a certain amount, then, you don't have that same level of independence and independent decision making and stuff like that. And prices do get managed, and so yeah.
It's an interesting contrast with what we heard from Annette, with Co-op Power. So here's an organization that is a network of local co-ops across the Northeast. And there's maybe six of them now that are part of it, and they want to grow. So they're in New York City, they're in Boston, they're in some other smaller towns in Massachusetts and maybe upstate New York. Each co-op is locally chartered, and they just sort of decentralized their governance even more, she was telling us. And to your point, Chris, about how you stay rooted in relationship, her particular co-op is in Boston, but it's in 4 neighborhoods in Boston: Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, one other. But even with that scale, they want to organize more locally within each of those neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. Following Marshall Gann's sort of community organizing protocol that they're doing national and even international training. I think certainly national scale training on models for organizing, but then applying that really locally, even when they have an already local framework and tied to a regional network. There's all these different layers. It's really interesting, and they seem to be, from what I heard about them at Root Skills, where I met Annette a few weeks ago, it sounds like they're really they're doing well. I mean, they've been at it for 5 years, 6 years, maybe, I want to say, and growing. But each of those local areas, each of the local co-ops, you're saying, have very distinct dynamics. So they're really doing different things and centrally managing them.
And this is there, do they engage with local existing electric co-ops?
So they're forming them. They are an electric co-op.
They are forming
electric energy, based. So either it's co-ops that are installing solar for homeowners, or they're doing community. In Boston, they're doing community-owned solar because most people are renters, and they're working with nonprofits to help them figure out how to take advantage of the tax credits they can't actually use that are the main financial incentive for renewables.
Yeah, as I understood, it was usually people of color and folks who didn't really know how to get easily organized around this and make the most of those, get access to solar, right? So. I mean, it's interesting, Chris, what you're talking about in terms of Vermont. And I always, when I first came to the Northeast 14 years back, I used to, Vermont is Vermont, it's Vermont. And you guys are, even when I think of Food Solutions New England, I think like Vermont's so much more organized already, right? Vermont and Maine are they're different cats and they're their own thing. And how it must feel like to be part of this Food Solutions New England group, where to a certain extent, you guys are the elders in the process. You've been good at it, right? You have those models and stuff like that are solid, and that's worked because Vermont's got its own strong identity too, and how it feels like then to be in this mix, in this two-pot with all of these other guys who are just like still budding comparatively. And so if everybody's at their different stages of development and put together what that gets to look like, like if you have to go back into the greenhouse after you're sort of flourishing as a bit of a tree, is that how it feels like, or,
Well, I know the big I think there's an awareness, particularly around food systems, that we're ahead of the curve. And I know the big conversations happening now in Vermont and even in our local groups and more broadly are transportation, because of course we're a rural state. So in terms of energy consumption, we're way worse than other states. And housing, which is really sort of becoming a huge challenge, both in urban, meaning Burlington, places that have at least a little bit of density, the bigger cities, and particularly in the rural areas. And it's a very different issue to sort of try and envision creating affordable housing in rural areas. So those are sort of the big rising topics that I get to hear about. And, it's those topics that we try and sort of open up for conversation and, and have sort of broader, sort of bring people together around those broad topics. Although the topics for this year, I should say, are soil, our sort of soil health, soil carbon, big dialogue around that, and then another one on workplace democracy, which is why I was very interested. And I did have, is it Lynn Bernander? Is that the woman from the Power? Is that the name? Maybe you don't know.
I don't know all the people involved. Yeah, there might, and that's part of the Boston co-op. It might be one of the larger organizers of the whole thing. Yeah, I mean, it's the state level in New England does seem to, in some ways, be more juicy than the whole, New England region. In Food Solutions New England, Connecticut has sort of been named, like you're joking, is that even part of New England? It's like, and the Connecticut, like, I mean, it's sort of in the, it's much more urban, although also very segregated, right? You've got, poor black, poor cities with mostly people of color, and then these very wealthy white communities, and not a lot of really integrated spaces in the education system and some of the different communities, and a lot of wealth in Connecticut in parts, some of the richest places in the country and the world. So I think within Food Solutions New England, there is a sense that Connecticut isn't as integrated into the larger process and conversation sometimes.
Yeah, they're sort of like probably extended New York region too in certain ways,
Well, part of the state definitely is in the New York suburban orbit, Fairfield County, where I am. I'm kind of on the edge of that. And then you have other parts that feel more like New England. You can sort of tell by what sports teams people root for, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Greenwich and Hartford are very different personalities, right?
Right.
So, and the thing is also this idea of there's so much commuting that happens from Connecticut into New York City, workers and stuff like that. But their kids and all of that go to a different school. And I mean, when you were speaking of even the rivers and the watershed, Hudson River is extremely important to folks in the boroughs too. But whether that linkage is really there, that this river that I want to be close to because it's, it's so present. Hudson is so present when you come to Manhattan, when you go to Brooklyn. And yet that we are one watershed.
Yeah.
That we're connected. Is I don't know if it lands that way. Our urban and our rural are not very connected through that main connecting vein, which is so she's there all the time.
They're coming back in a few seconds, by the way.
All right.
It's true. Well, and I think, Boston versus, the rest of New England, you see that too, where they're connected because rich people have second homes or go on ski vacations, right? So the local economy is often driven by tourism from the cities.
Yeah. I think that would even be true even in Rhode Island and stuff like that. You'd find, New Yorkers headed over to all of New England.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, we are back. Did we lose Ted?
Yeah.
Okay. So the plan, Annette and Madeline, are you here? I don't see you. But...
Yes, I am, Madeline.
All right.
I see your box, Net, but I don't hear you.
Well, I thought that one thing we might do at this point, is we've got 20 minutes to go here. Maybe we just do some spoken sharing on what's come out of the conversation while it's fresh. There's also a little form where we can submit just some personal harvest ideas. We could take some time on the call to do that. And then I want to make sure we have a little time to talk about the schedule too. So maybe we won't worry about the form.
I had one question. Did Ted have a chance to speak in your in the first breakout? Because
yeah,
I think she had to leave before she got a chance in ours. So if there's anything she shared that you want to share with the rest of us,
Ted,
in terms of growth edges, I'd love to hear it. I didn't know she was going to be leaving.
Yeah,
Ted
masculine
uses he pronouns.
You're referring to Ted as she, but Ted's a he.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You knew him when he was a her.
Mm-hmm. I'll remember to speak of him that way now.
Yeah, we did hear from Ted in the first group. Right? Sure. He spoke first. About some of the, there's notes about it, but you know, that Sociocracy for All mostly does virtual training. They're operating globally, but Ted, you know, is in the Pioneer Valley and has connections there in various ways. And now they have a new person whose name I didn't catch, who's part of SOFA, so Sociocracy for All, who's doing some local scale outreach and organizing there. So he was. There is that tension in general, right? Like between now that we're virtually connected to the whole planet, right? Once you get out of your actual where you physically are at the pretty local level, how much does regional matter? Where does it matter? Where does it add value? Madeline, can you while you're typing, please? We're hearing your keyboard. Thanks. So I think that's one of the growth edges that I've noticed. I'd love to hear from other people. You know, what struck you? You know, what were there any themes and patterns, or sort of clear questions or opportunities, or even some specific, like Chris, you mentioned a possible collaboration with you and Madeline around the film that you produced. So there's some nice little things happening that'd be nice to just be your name.
I don't know about this film.
That's because I couldn't talk in my session.
That's right. We know about the collaboration that you're working on, Madeline.
Oh, it sounds awesome, Chris.
Chris, I also
Yeah,
about that
we'll
film.
definitely be in touch.
Go ahead.
We'll definitely be in touch. You know, there was a number of things in terms of that first round of conversations with, you know, with Nathan and that I wanted to sort of get back around to you, but we don't need to do that now because it's sort of more little sort of concrete kinds of things that I can reach out to you about.
But how will you find me? Are you on Slack?
I am on Slack.
Yeah, I think if everyone doesn't have everyone else's email, we can make sure that's the case too, for those of you that want to communicate that way. I'm hoping Slack becomes a good tool for us. So what other, just, you know, short popcorn reflections are nice for this phase, since we maybe have 10 minutes to spend on this. And then there's time for it to percolate and sit more. What stands out?
And our dates.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Let's spend 10 minutes on this and 5 minutes on our dates.
I think one of the things that was clear to me is obviously the regional community organizing part, and we went super micro, and then things like food solutions, which is macro to a certain extent, that the community organizing has to happen on the ground and super local. And yet there is, Ben, you spoke about this, the context of, you know, regional and global that we operate in. So to what extent we spoke of too much, top heavy, less. So I think there's this trying to figure out an understanding of how much should we be contributing to the collective, where it supports us and where it hinders us. And I don't think there's any clear guidelines or metrics, which there shouldn't be because it depends from region to region. But that was a theme that I definitely heard was there. And Chris, I'll reach out to you about the movie too, because I know you said no. I know you said it doesn't have a lot of urban appeal, but I think we need to start building those bridges.
Good.
And Naima is a good person for that.
I could send everybody a link to the film, but the film is we call it primarily a dialogue. So the film is leverage for dialogue in small groups. So I hate sending out the link because then people just sort of watch the film and, you know, it's like going to a movie and then the movie's over and you walk out of the theater and you sort of forget 2 hours later, you know what it's about. So, but I can cheat and send you some of it.
Yeah, I'd love to include that in the annotated resource list for the dialogue too, Chris, and maybe mention, you know, that there's a whole dialogue process, and perhaps that we can try some virtual versions of those discussion conversations too. I'm fascinated by co-op power and looking forward to learning more in it, because it seems like you're really straddling all these different scales and figuring out what works at each level.
Yeah, it's still a process for us. We're still you know, still also trying to figure out, does this work, especially for Boston Metro East, you know, being a metropolitan area, as Tara, is that yeah, I think she mentioned something that resonated well with me, the fact that she's working with this community and this one you know, there are communities that understand organizing and others that don't, and I think in the metropolitan area it is a bit difficult to get the community organizing going. So that's why we thought of actually going really to the macro level and really starting it small, and then, you know, hopefully grow within the neighborhood. But we really think as core power, starting on the regional level and then going onto the communities and all the way to the neighborhood is a model that we believe will work.
I asked Ben, is Lynn Bernander a name with co-op power?
Yes, she's still the president of Core Power.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she came to the Localize It conference and did a workshop, you know, when we did that conference a year ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I've been wanting to reconnect and get co-op power out here. We're in the midst of starting our own community-owned community solar project on our own, but still there's sort of I think at least a lot more for me to learn about what co-op power does.
Oh, wonderful! I'll get you her details. We recently had training for the whole region on community solar, and we're thinking of redoing it. So that would be something that anyone on this network would be able to join and, you know, and learn more about community solar and how to bring it to your community. Yeah.
Okay.
Another theme that I think I'm hearing is something about location and connection. How do we connect both on the micro and the regional? And this is one space. Libraries are a space that are more ubiquitous and available than a lot of. It's one of our few community spaces that's really open and inviting and free. And Madeline is really doing a lot of great work with that, and that I find that very inspiring. And I'm looking to see how yards can do that for us in ways that they might have once but don't now. But the issue, the theme is really about connection and place. Where do we connect?
And Chris has the Bale Center in South Royalton, and you're connected with the community commons space in Hamden. So there are these sort of It's another category. Do those have a name? What are those community organizing or commons spaces?
We actually call our place the Commons. So it's.
And ours is Whitneyville Cultural Commons, and it's in the process of potentially partnering with other churches that have dwindling populations and can't maintain a budget. But if it's also a community and an event space, so it's potentially a growing network of community spaces growing up out of buildings that were created in locations.
Right. There was a church that had pretty much was down to 8 members.
Something like that. And there's 2 other churches they're negotiating with now. Yeah.
They turned it into its community commons space and co-working. Is there an impact hub in Boston? I think you're muted.
I think there is. I'd have to look it up, but I've heard of an impact hub. I will research. Yeah. I will research that for you. Yeah.
There's a global network of them. And I know like the one in Oakland is probably, a place where a lot of what we're talking about, I know is a place where a lot of what we're talking about has organizing around these themes has happened. But there's dozens of them around the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the points that Annette mentioned too, again with this, when we look at the different communities, and we talked about it specifically in the context of suburban and urban having completely different strategies, and in a very tangible way, right? That you have buildings versus houses, so you'd have to have different ways of having community-owned stuff for the buildings. And I think it's what you were talking about, Chris, like the video is more suited to the rural discussion. And then interestingly enough, I'm part of something called Kiss the Ground, which has created a bunch of really good videos around the soil story. And they are based in LA, so they use their local resources of Hollywood actors and made it like pretty dumbed down. It's awesome, right? Like everybody can feel comfortable showing it to an urban person without it getting like, whoa, too much, what? And I think it's those sort of things can help bridge some of this disparity that we have, where, again, I was saying the Hudson River is common to both our growers and our consumers, but the growers are in a very different echo chamber than where the consumers are. And so that bridging needs to happen, and the fact that we need different strategies, even if we are talking the same region.
I almost wonder if bridging urban to rural is a more powerful lens than regional somehow. That it's like, we know hyperlocal is where the change really has to happen in the organizing. When we scale out, at least maybe at the transformational edge, right? That's a real powerful thing to be exploring. Not that other kinds of regional organizing don't make lots of sense, but that's a place where I see us getting, stuck and siloed.
That resonates. I shared something on our first breakout with, and Dana seemed to really resonate with the idea of kind of 3 water-related corridors. There's kind of the coastal. She talked about how there's a big difference between Eastern Massachusetts and the coast and the Berkshires, and one is Hudson Valley and one is coastal, and there's the Connecticut River, and really everyone exists somehow within or connected to 2 out of 3. So if you think of the urban-rural connection and the watershed connection combined,
we're talking about watersheds, and I just got a flash flood warning on my phone.
Yeah.
It has been raining quite a bit in the Northeast.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't even get out because we have both a winter storm warning a flood watch and a high wind warning, so I didn't even get out of my house. I'm sitting in my house as opposed to down at the Commons because I'm sort of stuck in this watershed.
All for the solstice. Well, and this has been, I think you talked about, oh, you're on mute. And I think you talked about this too. I wonder if we run the fear of, once again, drawing wrong lines, right? Like, where is it really right to section off New England as the region where it's historically coming from? Or you look at a state like Connecticut, and Nate, we talked about how Connecticut has different cities with varying cultures, extremely varying cultures. And that, where does Western, go ahead.
Yeah, can you pause that thought? Because Fyodor just dropped in. We have another conversation happening in this room. So I'm going to move us all into a breakout where we can do our scheduling. And Fyodor, you can hang out here and greet your folks, and I'll be back shortly. And maybe some of us are staying around too. I don't know. Okay?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, guys. Okay.
No,
Sure.
no, nothing to apologize for. All right, so let's just move into a breakout to finish up.
Oh, shoot.
What?
Oh, I'm here. Okay. I still have sound.
Yep.
Yeah, we got you all over here this time. And there's no echo. It went away.
Flash full one too.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. And then I'm also noticing we have less than the 5 minutes I'd hoped for scheduling. Do people have a hard stop in 3 minutes? Can we go over slightly? A little bit? Annette, are you okay to go a little past an hour? Okay, great. Do you want to just finish what you were saying and then we'll move to the scheduling piece?
Yeah, so just to wrap it up, just again, when we are getting together as collectives and stuff like that, if it's an organically evolved process versus one that's not, and therefore are we running the fear of drawing the wrong lines again, perhaps?
Say more about what's the not organic, or what's that distinction?
So the non-organic, for example, when Food Solutions Hub New England, right, and whether New England as is the right lens to look at it, just because, and you'd spoken about this, Ben, like, you know, that comes more from a colonial perspective. You've definitely got parts of New England which are distinctly different culturally from other parts of New England, could possibly belong in other regions. And so I think we've culturally evolved such that some of those boundaries and those lines that we draw don't make sense, but we're continuing to perpetuate that. And where does that come from? You know, and is that the wise way to do it?
Yeah. Great. Well, this feels like a really juicy start. I hope everyone feels that they got some value out of this and that we have some things to keep working with. So speaking of continuing to work, the dialogue, this conversational part ends on January, it was officially January 7th. We might have a couple more days in there. Things keep getting pushed back. There'll be a third round of the dialogue of sort of shared meaning making, but we had, you know, our contribution to the open conversations is satisfied by what we've done here.